Alrighty, let's get that just echoed.
I made you host.
Yes, thank you. Okay, let's get started now that we got that echo situation figured out. All right, so if you haven't already, please log into the participation link for today. And just if you could fill out the first thing, if I could find where I put it. It goes over here. Hold on 1 second. Let me just double check to make sure I have the right one. All right. So we should be good now. Alrighty. So if you can, just fill out the first slide over here. And we just have a quick warm-up exercise as well. So that'll be on screens 1 and 2, and then we'll get started. And let me put the link in the chat as well. That way you guys can access that as well. Oh, wait a second. This might be the wrong one. Hang on. I think I sent the wrong one. Give me 1 second. That's why no one is joining. I know that is the right one. Okay. All right, I just updated the link. If you could if you could join the second one. Okay, yeah, people are joining now. Fantastic. So yeah, if you guys could fill out the first and second slide, and then we'll get started for the day. Alrighty, let's get started. So our warm-up activity, imagine you have a large gradebook spreadsheet. Column A contains student names, columns B through D contain individual assignment scores, and column E contains their final calculated percentage. You want to build a visual chart that compares student names directly against their final percentage. Since these two columns are separated by other data, what keyboard modifier must you press and hold down to select these two non-adjacent columns together? So the fact that it's non-adjacent data means that we can't just use the shift key, right? Because if we use the shift key, we're essentially saying that we're going to select everything. So if I pull up, let's say, my spreadsheet over here, right? If I hold down shift and I click on something else, it selects everything in between. Instead, I have to actually select using the command or control key, depending on if you're on a Mac or PC. And this allows me to select individual boxes without them needing to be consecutive. So for this one, right, we want to hold down control key or command key. If we did control A, this would just select everything. So because we want to have non-adjacent columns, we just have to make sure that we're using control or command in that case. Alrighty. Any questions before we get started on the lesson? Okay. So today we're going to be going over how to make our data visual in the form of charts. So we're going to learn how to make some basic charts, how to convert data into charts, and pretty much just make our data nicely visualized because sometimes numbers aren't really the best indicators of what's really going on with the data. We're visual learners, so we want to be able to see that visually. So, from any science class that you've probably taken before, you're probably very familiar with a variety of different chart types, right? We have columns, bars, pies, lines, combos, all kinds of things like that, right? So, if we have a column chart, right, we're literally using different columns to represent our data. So, we're showing like the height of that chart, right? So the taller the column, the taller the value. We can use this to show like different percentages, different pieces of something. If we see something that is a much taller column than another, it's going to be a way better indicator that one quantity is bigger than another. Likewise, bar charts are kind of the horizontal version of those column charts. So instead of having it up and down, we're going to have something a little bit more left to right. Pie charts, right? Pretty self-explanatory. You're taking a slice of the pie. We're dividing one thing into little fractional components of it. That's great for when you want to say, like, if you're taking the budget of something, right? The total budget broken up into little fractional parts. Line chart is going to be more of like a trend over time. So if you're showing how like a line is fluctuating, maybe the use of a certain word over the years, right? The dictionary has like a feature that does that and it shows it in a line chart. Maybe someone has used it in much earlier times and now it's no longer cool to use that certain word, so its usage has gone down. And you can also combine a bunch of these guys too, right? If there's certain data that you're using and you're using multiple types of data like value and percentages, or if you wanted to have like fractional components as well as value components, you could always mix and match these guys as well. So Excel is really nice in that way. So before we go on with that, right, let's take a look at what some of these guys look like on Excel, right? So if I had some sample data, let's just say to start off with, I had just 1, 2, 3, and I have 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000. All right, nothing really crazy here, just ordinary data, nothing really crazy. Okay, I could go to insert, right? And I could insert a variety of different charts up here. There will be recommended charts here that Excel will kind of work its magic and deduce what type of data you have and what chart would best fit this. So based on this data, it seems that a scatter plot, right, with little dots, very similar to a line chart, but without the lines, might work nice. Maybe a clustered column chart, right? This is our vertical columns. Something like this might work out nicely. Although this is kind of a little bit hard to see because the first column of 1, 2, 3 is way smaller than our second column. Something else would be our horizontal bar chart, right? Something like that shows that we have our X axis being in the 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 range, and our Y axis being our 1, 2, and 3 range, right? We could do a pie chart to show the distribution as well. This doesn't really work too well with this because this is just assuming that I have like 1 1,000th, 2 1,000, 2 of 2,000, 3 of 3,000s, and that's not really what we're dealing with. We're not really dealing with fractions here. Could do a line chart, normal column chart, all different types of things, right? Now, this might not be the exact way that we want it to be, right? Again, these are automatically just sampled from whatever data that we have. So we're going to learn about ways to actually make this work for us, right? Maybe I wanted a bar chart, but I don't want it to look like this. I want the 1, 2, 3 to be like on the other side, right? Maybe I need to like transpose or switch my rows and my columns to get it the way that I want to get it, right? But again, we can always work with it later on, but sometimes these are going to be your good starting points. If there's a chart here that you want that isn't in the recommended charts, I could look for it right over here. So over here, I could take a look at my 2D or 3D columns, right? We could be fancy and have 3D columns, 2D bars, 3D bars. Over here, this is tree map and sunburst. These actually are pretty cool. I haven't seen these myself, but this is kind of an extension of our pie graph in the sense that it's showing pieces of a puzzle in a sense. Okay, we have our line graphs. So I could have anything as simple as just simple lines. I could have dots. I could have 3D lines. I could have an area graph instead. Maybe I want things shaded in, right? I could do something like that. I could make it 2D. I could make it 3D. I could do anything I want with this, right? Histogram charts. This is great for showing the deviations in our data. You can easily see how things are essentially scattered throughout the data. You could pinpoint our mean, median, and mode. Box and whisker plots allow us to see our extremal values. Those are our whiskers, right? The parts that are kind of extremal that are outside of the box itself. Pie charts. Look at that. There's even a donut chart going on the idea of food over here. And scatter plots, right? Let's say I just have a bunch of like data that's really not like related to each other very much. And I want to see, hey, does this stuff correlate at all? Right? Maybe I don't want to connect it with lines because it would be a hot mess. Instead, maybe I do a scatter plot. So there are an incredible amount of different plots that you can use, and you can customize these to your liking. The good part is that Excel does this automatically for you, right? So sometimes if you are specific enough with your data, this will come out perfectly, right? You can literally just click and boom, you're all done, right? Maybe I want just a simple little plot over here, right? I click on that. All right, maybe this will be my starting point, right? This kind of shows our data pretty well, I would say. Shows our x-axis being our 1, 2, and 3, our y-axis being 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, right? So I got my chart here. It's a little simple, but we can add a lot more to it as we go along. I could drag it, right? I could put it wherever I want. I could have it kind of replace my data like that. Or if I want to, I could essentially put this onto its own thing as well, right? If I were to move the chart, right, I could make it its own sheet. Maybe I have it based on data on sheet one, but I want to make a new sheet completely and isolate it onto that sheet, right? If I want to keep it separate from the data itself, right? Now I have an entire sheet dedicated to this one chart. And my original data is untouched. Great, because now I have my data in two different forms. I have it here, where it's just simple numbers, and I have it visually as well. And I can clearly see that things are going up, right? But it's still kind of boring, right? Maybe I want to change some colors, right? I could make things different colors. I could change the theme going on over here, right? Maybe I want to have it as blue lines. Maybe I want to have like a black background, have like a blue background going on. I could change all different themes like that. The bar graphs, I think, are a little bit easier to see with something like that, right? Because you could change the color of the bars more easily. But again, every graph is a little bit different. Now, I could also change my components as well. This just says chart title. Well, that is not descriptive at all. Let's maybe change this up, right? I could change its location, get rid of it, make it above the chart, center it on an overlay, meaning I make it literally on top of the graph part itself. I could put some creative title here, right? Maybe I want to specify what my axes are. I could say axis title, and I could just say like, this is my x-axis, right? And I could do the same for my y, right? Could make this a little bigger too if I wanted to. Could change the fill, transparency, text outline, a whole bunch of cool stuff like that. So you can honestly be as creative as you want with this kind of stuff, right? And you can basically see how you want to structure your data, right? So these built-in charts are a great starting point for that. So let's go back to our slides. So we kind of went through, we know data is plotted on our axes, horizontal X, vertical Y. Then you also have the category axis, which is just the labels for different points, right? If I want to label where a point is. The value axis is showing our incremental numbers. That's showing how we're increasing from like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. We have a different key going on over here, right? I have it going from 0 to 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. So I see it's incrementing, right? Uh in boxes of 500. Now I could change that all different ways as well. I don't have to necessarily keep it as the built-in one here, right? Maybe I only want to have the y-axes that actually have a point, just that 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Or maybe I want to show it as something greater, right? You've designed graphs before in science classes, I bet, right? And you had to determine what is the best scaling factor. Same thing here. Okay. So again, I could take any data set that I want, right? Let's say we have this one over here that takes your job title and it shows the estimated amount of money that people are making. So something like this can also be made into a nice little chart like that. This is an example of our bar chart, our column chart, sorry. Columns being vertical, up and down, bars would be horizontal. So each in our column chart, each of our data points is being shown as the height of this column over here. So more money, higher column, right? And I could change the colors too if I wanted it to be something else, but usually Excel will try to make it into colors that are very easy to tell apart. And again, if I had more columns here, I would have more columns here, right? Each of these are grouped together based on the job title. So I have computer systems analysts. Those are the first two, right? It has the 2022 and the 2032 estimates. Then I have network system admins. That's the second group. I have my 2022, 2032, and on and on and on. So if I added, let's say, spreadsheets designers as like an extra title, and it had its 2022 and 2032 estimates, there would be another group of columns right over here that would have the 2022 and 2032 estimates for that. So all of these guys, right in the insert part, and you can see all of the charts here. Okay, so our column chart groups it all nicely. The difference between columns and clustered columns is whether or not we have multiple pieces of data, right? In the previous example that we had gone over, we saw that we had the 2022 and the 2032 examples. But if I only had one money amount, I could just have only one column, right? It doesn't have to be clustered. We could just compare only two things. The key here, though, is if I want them to be clustered, I just need them to be relating to the same type of data, meaning they're both related to money. I can't say this is related to money and this is related to a percent, right? That's not going to work because this graph, this y-axis, is only in terms of money. So I have to make sure that if I cluster data together, the data is the same. Otherwise, it will not work for us. So when you're making a specific chart, right, on maybe a really big data set that isn't as nice and organized, you have to choose what specifically are you comparing, right? If I'm comparing the job title and the 2 years of money, okay, well, I can do that with the clustered column chart. But if I wanted to use a regular column chart or a bar chart or something else, I couldn't compare both of these guys, right? I wouldn't have it clustered like this. An alternative, instead of showing the columns as separate, would be to stack them instead. Now, this is nice to kind of show it as a whole, right? It's showing the sum of all of the money. So 2022 is showing that computer systems analysts are going up to 500,000. Then the next however much is for network system admins, and the next however much is for our web developers. So it's showing that in total, right? The total amount that all these guys are bringing in is probably about 1,100,000, right? This is not great for looking at the individual amount of money that these people are bringing in, right? You could like zoom in and kind of eyeball it like, okay, this is like making however much, this is making however much, this is making however much. But it tells a different story than the previous one. Previous one, immediately I know, oh, computer systems analysts, I know you make this much, you make that much. Done. Here, I got to really look at it much closer. This is telling me instead the total number that they're making. This I'd have to actually add up each part. So every type of graph, every type of chart is going to have its own purpose, which you have to consider as you're building your charts. This is also good for showing the percentages of things, right? Maybe I want to show how much money someone's making out of a total in a percentage, right? I could see that here is 50%, right? That means these computer systems people are bringing in about half of the total amount of money. This tells a different story than this guy. They're saying that they're the same chart, right? But because I scaled my value axis differently, this tells a story about how much money you're making. This tells us how much money in relation to the other jobs am I making. So we saw that in the example that by default, my chart was inside my sheet, right? This was broken into a chart area, but I could make it into a chart sheet instead, right? If I wanted to, instead of having my sheet in here, make it into a sheet like this, maybe this makes it a little bit more organized, right? You have to see what you prefer. Maybe you want to have your data right next to the table, right? You want to have a table and you want to have a chart next to it. Okay, maybe you want to keep it completely separate so this is on its own page. So you have to take into consideration, do I want it in an area within a sheet or do I want it to be its own sheet? And I could move it using all the same commands that we've done before. Okay, we could size it just like a picture. Charts kind of work as any old element would. So I can just make them bigger, make them smaller, make the specific titles and subtitles and axis labels also bigger and smaller too. I could change it up here instead. So if I wanted to change certain things, I see that I have not only the chart design, but I also have the format up here. Here, I could change all different things, right? I could change different outlines of things. This was not really a good look for this specific chart, right? But in another chart, maybe we want to change different outlines. Maybe we want to arrange it so that certain things are on top of other things, right? Maybe I have multiple bars and I want one bar to be on top of another one, right? We do have a chart that does that for us. It was the stacked line graph, but we could be creative too. Maybe we want this title to stand out more if it's on top of data that already exists. So if I want to format the specific components, make it look pretty, change whatever, I'm going to use the format setting. If I want to change the chart itself, right, like the title, the axis, any of that kind of stuff, or its theme, that's where I'm going to use the chart design. If you notice, these are only going to pop up when I'm actually on a chart. Over here, they go away. I have to actually physically insert a chart, right? Highlight this, insert the chart, and then I could finally go to chart design and do all of this kind of stuff, right? Maybe I want to make it an orange highlight. Maybe I want to bring it back to black. Maybe I want to change its text to green. Maybe I want to add different shadows, reflections, glow, all kinds of things like that. I can do all of that here. I could even insert more shapes if I want. Maybe I want to put an arrow somewhere, right? I'm pointing literally at the data there. That makes it a lot easier to see. All of this can be done in the Format tab, right? And that can only be accessed when I'm on a physical chart itself. Okay. We're not really printing anything in this class for obvious reasons. We're only really doing it on our computers. But if I wanted to, I could print out charts. The best way to do this is by having it be its own sheet. Otherwise, if I'm printing this out, this is really going to be tiny, right? If this is like a whole sheet of paper and this thing is like there, that's going to be tiny. I want it to be something more like that, right? That's like literally a whole normal sheet of paper. And I could change all kinds of things too here. I could go into print preview if I want to make sure like, oh, is the chart on the whole page and everything. But we don't really need to worry about that here. Okay, so recommended charts. All right. So we can also analyze the data itself as well, right? This is kind of like one of those built-in features. I wasn't able to get this to work on my end, and I think it just might be the Excel version itself that doesn't allow me to do that. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. The key here is that whatever data we select is what gets automatically analyzed and converted into a chart, right? If I put more data over here, right, but I only highlight this part, this is the only part that's going to be made into a chart. So if I have like a lot of stuff going on, right, I gotta keep in mind what specifically do I want charted. If I got a really big spreadsheet, like some of the examples that we did in lab, right? Catherine's coffee shop. There was a lot of things going on there. If I want to make a graph that shows the revenue that Catherine had made, right? I'm not going to include maybe the the products themselves, let's say. I would only care about graphing the money that went out and the money that went in, right? So I have to be careful in those bigger sheets and highlight specifically what I want to graph. And as we did in our previous, in the check-in at the very beginning, right? They don't have to be consecutive, right? If I had a column in between of these guys, right? And it was preventing me from like getting to it like consecutively, I could just use my command key or control key and just highlight the exact data that I want to use that way too. So you can choose exactly what you want. And you could play around with it too, right? If they use the wrong X and Y coordinates, right? Instead of highlighting this first and then this, do it the other way, right? Make sure that it's in the way that you want. We can always transpose our data too, right? If I copied this, pasted that, paste options, transpose, right? Telling a little bit of a different story, okay? If I were to make this into a chart, let's just say, okay, this is kind of making it the same in this way, but let's say I had a bar chart like that, right? This is telling a different story than this chart over here, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing it in that right fashion. Maybe I want 1, 2, 3 to be on the x-axis. Maybe I want it to be on the y-axis. We don't know. We can switch things as we see fit. We could change our original data, or we could change it over here as well. So just like with clustered column charts, can do the same with the bar charts. Only difference between bar and column, bars are horizontal, columns are vertical. Line charts, if I want to show a trend line, for example, right, this is the best thing to show for that. This automatically will use these points and construct a line of best fit. If you ever remember from maybe like an algebra or pre-calculus class, you went over line of best fit, right? How can we best connect points? How can we create a function out of something that's a lot of data that might not have a nice line to connect all the points? That's what Excel is doing in the background for you. So if I have a lot of data and I got to find a way to connect those points, line charts are great for showing that, right? Even if I only have the years 2010, 15, 2020, 2025, 2030, if I want to estimate, let's say 2026, I know 2026 is right around here. I might not have the original data, but I can estimate exactly where it would be on this line. So it's great for also figuring out estimates between years that we might not have. Okay, pie chart is great for percentages to show like the piece of a pie, literally the piece of a pie. And what's really cool also about pie charts is especially if I have a 3D pie chart, let me see if I can get that formatted really quickly, right? Of course, we decide that we don't want to work today. Ah, there we go. Okay. Now, I believe if I click on one of these pieces, right, you're able to essentially get it to kind of come out a little bit and select it, right? So I can actually take a piece of the pie out, right, and select this one part. So I know that this is saying series 1.2, right? This is showing that this is the part that I am specifically analyzing, right? Maybe this is like key data, right, in a budget, right? This is 100% of the budget, and this is the most important part. Maybe it's the food budget, let's say, right? Food's very important. And the rest of it, like, we don't care about that as much, but we want to show that this is a piece of that puzzle, right? It's a great way to emphasize this. And I can do this with these different types of pie graphs to kind of show that. So I could change the angle too. I can do all kinds of things to show that it's not just like a standard circle, right? We can make it nice and 3D, make sure that we can actually kind of see what's going on, and it tells a nice little story that's going on. So these are best when you have percentages, right? Think of like an actual pie. You take a piece of a pie, It's a part of the graph that's going on, a part of the data. I could take a physical slice going on. And as I mentioned before, right, we can combine these things too. I have, let's say, multiple pieces of data that's going on here, right? Maybe I want to combine things. Maybe I want to have a column and a line chart. So our columns are still showing, right? This time, the number of new jobs by 2032, right? So we're showing that the primary axis for the columns, right? And we also have this line showing the percent of change, right? So from here to here, right? It's showing how much am I changing, right? That's based on this secondary axis. So I could have two different axes going on at the same time. The key here, though, is it's essentially using that same x-axis. We know this part of the line is dealing with computer systems, this one's dealing with web developers, and this part is dealing with network admins. So we're able to clearly see that it's based on the same piece of our data. So even if you have a lot of different pieces of data and you want to show like two things and you don't want to just create a second graph, maybe you want to compare on the same scale two pieces of data, right? This tells a different story than if I had this on two separate graphs with two completely unrelated axes of data. So combo charts are great for that kind of different pieces of data. Okay, scatter plots, if I have a variety of data that just literally makes no sense, I can't find a trend, and I want to just really show how things are related, right? This is great if I have data that's coming from a survey, let's say, right? Not all data coming from a survey is going to meet a nice line of best fit, right? Sometimes it's just of best fit, it's not of the exact fit, right? I could draw a line if I wanted to, right? Through the data, but it won't go through all the data points. So if I have data that's not correlated very well, right? It's not like a nice straight line, not like a nice little function I can make of this. Scatter plots can be nice for that. Right, how are we doing? Okay. Let me finish up this part and then we'll take a break. All right. So those were the main types of charts. There is also a couple of others, right? We know that we can access these other charts. If I were to go here, insert, right? I could access all these guys by clicking on these different categories here, right? So area charts, similar to a line chart, right? It's just showing the colors between the lines to help show that there's clearly a change going on. So instead of just having the lines themselves, there's going to be color below it to actually show what's kind of going on over here, right? We can see that right here. So this is more descriptive than just showing the line itself, because now it's like, okay, I see this dark blue area is taking up all of this part. It's not just a straight line. It's going from this part of the y-axis to this part. If anyone's taken calculus at all, this is very related to integrals as well. It's the area below a curve, the area below a certain line that's given. There's also, we had shown briefly if I had box and whisker plots as well, right? This is showing clearly the data within the box is usually within your averages. That's within usually one or two or three standard deviations of each other. All that means is it's data within a certain range. If most people are getting a score within a 50 to an 80 on the exam, all of those scores would be inside that box. But let's say someone got a 90, someone did really good, and someone got a 20, someone did really bad. Those are our outliers. Those would be within the whiskers, outside of those specific boxes. Okay, funnels are fun, null. For something like that, get the exact one of what it looks like so you can kind of see. I think it popped up over here, right? It's funneling your data essentially. It's showing how you're going from one smaller component to a bigger component to a bigger component, making it kind of look like a pyramid going on, right? It's a little different than our bar charts, right? It's showing a quantity itself, not necessarily graphed in relationship to a value axis like this. It's just showing the pieces of the puzzle itself. Okay, histograms kind of similar to our box and whisker plots. It's kind of showing that we're putting them into specific pieces based on what values were given. And radar, you could think of it as if you're taking like a radar like on a ship or something, right? You see like that, it almost looks like a little target in a way. And everything's kind of radiating, hence radar, from that middle part. So you're able to kind of to compare things in relationship to each other, and you can see how close they are to that radar. Maybe they're like spot on, like middle of the target, or maybe they're a little bit further off. Okay, variety of other things. I wouldn't really worry too much about these kinds of charts. Honestly, these are kind of for more like specific aspects that you might not really use very often. Most often, you're going to really be using your bar charts, your column charts, those kinds of things. Um, but maybe you're doing a specific chart that you want, a specific piece of data that you need in a certain way, right? Excel literally can show your data so many different ways. Honestly, the best way is really experimenting with it. Click on the recommended charts and see how your data is broken up. Maybe you're like, well, I was kind of thinking of a column chart, but maybe doing it as a line chart shows a little bit better. Or, oh, that doesn't work too well. Maybe I do it as a column or a bar or even a funnel or something like that. You could experiment with these. It's better than having to do it yourself, right? You don't have to actually draw these things out yourself. Excel is doing all the hard work for you, which makes it really helpful. Okay. So aside from showing the data itself, right, we can even show different errors and trends as well, depending on our data. So I don't have to necessarily just show a correlation. I could show an error value. Let's say instead of showing the percentage that people got correct, I show the percentage that people got wrong, right? I could show that on a graph as well. It doesn't just have to be the pure data. I could do a trend line as well. Maybe I'm doing the trend of a word, as I was saying before, right? I can be very, very flexible with this kind of stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to just be an x-axis and a y-axis. Okay. We went over, I can add different chart elements, right? So if I wanted to essentially add different axes, I could add my error bars here if I wanted to. So this will kind of detect where I have like the error in the data in a sense. So if I'm showing, let's say, the amount of times things people got right, the error would then show the amount of things that people got wrong. And there's a whole variety of different components that you can add. So you don't necessarily have to accept the chart just at face value. I'm free to add any of these that I want. And you'll have plenty of time to practice these and everything with the labs. So I know it's kind of a lot that I'm throwing at you. But the key is if you know how to create any of these charts, you can create any of the others, right? All the charts are going to have the same type of data. You're going to have an axis. You're going to have an X and you're going to have a Y axis. You're going to have a title. You're going to have the data itself. It's either going to be maybe in a bar, maybe in a line, column, who knows? But it's essentially that same data just structured in different ways. I think this would probably be a good time to take a minute. So let's take a break. We'll get back at about 12-ish. So take a step back, get a little fresh air if you need, take a walk around, whatever you need. We will get back at 12.
You okay?
Break time.
Oh, nice.
Alrighty, so if you guys take a look at the Amplify classroom, I just opened 3 short questions. Just take a minute, answer them, and we'll go over them. And also, if anyone has any questions on any of the content that we've gone over so far, let me know. We can always go back over it if you need. Just let me know. We can take a minute, make sure everyone's good. You should be able to access these questions here. So just as a bit of a side note, you still have time. Go ahead, finish the questions and everything. But we're working on getting the roster, right? So like all the students that are in person, online, etc. If you filled out the attendance, don't even worry. You guys are totally fine. It's the students that just don't come. It's like you got to be here in some form, online, in person, at least once in the first week. That way you're registered for the course. So, we got the official roster and we have all of the students' responses. Gee, I wonder if there was a way I could map them together and see and look up if something is there. That would be a great use of V or H lookup, right? So there you go. Right in the
With the absolute references, right?
Yes, make sure you use your absolute references. You want to make sure you're referring to the same piece of data every single time. And actually, even funnier, I was helping someone out in the math lab yesterday on literally using VLOOKUP. They were matching up students' IDs with their grades. So all of this stuff is so commonly used. Like no matter what field you go into, knowing this is like a superpower. Like you will use this, which is honestly great because sometimes like you learn stuff and you're like, when will I ever use this? Well, you will be, using this and it will make your life so much easier because instead of actually manually looking up something, like you can just have Excel do it for you, which is really cool. I even had like a boss at one of my internships who said, I'm going to give you this assignment and it'll probably take you all day. Well, I knew an Excel formula for it and I got it done in like 10 minutes. Of course, I pushed it a little bit further. I gave myself a little extra time, so to speak, so I could get myself a nice little break. But even then, he's like, "How did you get that done so soon?" Magic. No, just kidding. Excel. So, you can be the employee of the month with power of Excel. Anyway, continue. Alrighty, so let's get back. Let's go through the three questions and finish off strong. So for the first question, we see we got our little 3D pie chart going on, right? We're gonna have our pie chart here, right? Where you see that this guy over here is going to be isolated from our rest of our pie chart. Okay, so we have over here a couple of uh, columns over here. And again, Excel usually does these kinds of things automatically. So sometimes it's going to have a redundant axis or title. And it's like, we don't need revenue up here and we don't need it down here too. Like, it's pretty obvious. Like, if this is talking about revenue, like, this is clearly about revenue. So I don't really need to have it both here. It probably would be better to title this something a little more descriptive. Instead of being revenue, maybe it's like revenue of X position or whatever. And I could always say that like it's in dollars or whatever. But it's like, I don't really need this guy down here. So we could kind of get rid of that. Okay. And I could go to the add chart element, right? So if I'm on our chart here, go to chart design, right? And I could like toggle this off if I go to my horizontal. Oops, actually, let me use this one over here because this one actually has the one down here, right? And I could essentially toggle this guy off, right? Just by clicking on that. So I could click it to make it appear, click it again, and it disappears. So I could freely add vertical titles, make them disappear. Could do horizontal titles. I could even do chart titles the same way, right? I could get rid of it entirely. I could make it above the chart. Center overlay just means that it's on top of the data itself. Could do this with all of these kinds of things, right? So add chart element is also going to be to allow us to remove chart elements too. Okay, and then finally, we want the category to be having horizontal data bars, right? Kind of gives it away right there, bar chart, right? So horizontal data bars are always going to be your bar charts. Vertical data columns are going to be your column chart. Any questions before we get going again? All right, almost there, almost there. Okay, so next to the add chart layout, add chart element is the quick layout. So again, Excel does things automatically, but if we want to quickly change the layout without going into the add chart element, changing this, changing that, etc., I could go to quick layout and I can kind of have a couple of these default layouts that might be a little helpful to me. So instead of having to add, maybe I want to add a legend to the map, right? I want to have something that shows exactly what's going on here, right? I want to click here. And now on the side, I can see it pops up as series one. Now I only had one type of data here, so naturally it's only going to be one thing on the side here, right? Even if I had over here, let's say I took a look here, right? Pie chart, different layouts. So I can choose different things like this. Maybe I want to have the actual percentages overlaid on the pieces of my pie chart here. Well, I could do it something like that, right? Can do same with a bar chart, right? This has a variety of different things. Maybe I want to have a legend down here instead, right? This is showing me my entire table, right? Instead of having my table up here, I could have my table down here. So if I move this to its own sheet, like what I did with this guy over here, I still have my data also organized on that same sheet too. So there's a variety of all these different things that you can do, but any of this can still be added manually, right? I could add a legend this way too, right? Instead of doing it that way through my layout, maybe I want to add a legend like that. Maybe I want to add a data table, right? Data table is just converting this guy here, right? I could do the same over here if I wanted to. Oh, this one doesn't let me do that because it's a pie chart, I gather. But again, I could play around with it. Anything done here can be done manually. So you have complete control. You want to do something quick, get it done quick, use the quick layout. You want it in a very specific fashion, do it using manually with the add chart element. And also, you can hover over these, see what they are, right? Sometimes these little pictures are like, what is going on here? It looks like just pure chaos. And you can hover over it and see, oh, there's a title, there's a legend, horizontal axis, vertical axis. Again, all these things can be added manually too. Okay, I can format things more specifically as well, right? If I'm here and let's say I'm changing my axis, right? I click on my axis. I can change it using all these settings too. Maybe I want it to be filled, right? I can make a solid fill. I could change it instead of being white. Maybe I want to be yellow. So these guys are like now highlighted yellow. And I could make it more transparent, less transparent, whatever I want, right? I could have lines going around it, right? Maybe I want to specify exactly where this bar is starting. And all the same things here, change the color, transparency, etc. So the same thing I can do with the title, right? I can do it with the axes, both of these axes I can do it with. I can even do it with this data table over here, right? So anything that I want, I can change it. It does not have to be the default way. So if we make a chart, just click on the part that you want to change, and this little format thing will pop up on the side, and you have all of these possible things that you can change. You could change the effects of it. Maybe I want to have a shadow, a glow, pretty cool stuff, right? I could add presets to it. So a lot of the Microsoft stuff has a lot of these nice little presets. So I can make it like glow blue. Maybe I want to make it bigger. For some reason it's not popping up, but that's okay. We could imagine that it would possibly glow. In the end, it probably would not be the best thing to have here because it would make it very difficult to read. But again, pretty cool stuff. If you wanted to make a really cool looking spreadsheet, maybe not the most business professional one, but maybe for your own budgeting or something, you want to make it nice and fun. Maybe you have like you want to make a chore chart for like your family or something, and you want to try to make it as exciting as it could be, right? You can try to make things nice and fun. You can tell my graphic design side is showing with this kind of stuff, as I like to make things kind of colorful, which obviously you can probably guess from the spreadsheet from the syllabus and stuff. But yeah, let's get back to the stuff, right? Okay, so the axis is in different types of units. So, just be mindful of the unit that is being used by default. So sometimes it'll go by default. For instance, in the example that we had, we saw that the value axis, our y-axis, was going up by 500, right? I could change it, right, by going into the axis options. And maybe I want to make it way more spread out. Maybe I want to make it way more squished. I'm free to change it, right? Excel's going to try to guess. It's going to try to guess and make something that works, but I can just change it anytime I want by going into those axis options, and I can just change it that way. So that way it's displayed in a nice way that makes our data look a little bit nicer. Okay, so just like before, right, format the axis, pops up over here. So if you take a look this time, instead of using our, let me click here again, right? Instead of clicking over here, I'm gonna go over here. Okay, instead of using my little paint bucket, which is the format for our little text and everything, we're gonna go to the actual bar graph over here, column graph, whatever. And you can see here we have axis options, and I can change this at every time, right? So I can change whatever I need here. So instead of automatically selecting based on data, right? I can do I can change that, right? And I'm free to do as much whatever I want here, right? I could change the tick marks, right? Tick marks just meaning how many marks between these over here. So let's say instead of changing this from like 1, 2, 3, let's say I want to change it to like 5 or something, right? Um, I can change the label as well. All kinds of things like that are going to be done within this format axis. So I can do that by just clicking on one of these axes, and all of these things can pop up once I click on the actual text itself. So there's a lot of freedom that you have with these guys. Okay.
Professor,
Yeah, what's up?
so the you see how on the Excel page we were basing that information off of that pie chart, right? If there was multiple data sets on that Excel, but I only specifically wanted to make a pie chart or whatever chart based off of the data that you have on the left, I would first highlight that information and then click add chart or something like that.
Exactly, yes. So
Okay.
I highlight that specific data, insert, and then I can pick my chart up here.
Okay, and let's say I wanted to add on to that chart, but I already started with just those from like A6 to C7, right? Like, am I able to add or like manipulate slash edit that chart, or do I have to restart it?
So right now, this chart is based just on this part here,
Yeah,
right? So if I'm adding to it, let's say I do 4,000, right? As we can see, this does not change
yeah.
the data itself, right? So I'm going to have to highlight over it again and redo it so that it works on the new data itself, right? So if I
And would
did,
it,
Mhm.
sorry, would it reset everything that you just did on that chart thing then?
So only if I change the data that was used for the
Okay.
chart itself. For instance, if I change this to 2,500, notice that this now changed,
Yeah.
right? But because I added a new column, this column was never referenced on
Mm-hmm.
my chart in the beginning. It was
Mm-hmm.
only based on A6 through C7.
Mm-hmm. So then I guess now my question is, are you able to edit the reference of a chart that's already been made?
I believe so. Let's see. If I click on here and I go to select data, oh, here we go. So this is showing me that it's currently on that exact range, right?
Hmm.
A6 through C7.
Hmm.
I'm going to change this now to go to D7 instead, right? So this is now going to incorporate this new column that I added. And I could change the other things as well. If I needed to change the different Y values, I'm going to also change this from, actually, no, that would be correct, right? D6, that also updated as well. So I'm going to click OK now. And now I have my new column
Awesome.
specified here. So now I don't have to redo all of the formatting that I did on this.
Great.
Yeah, so just to go over that again, I clicked on this. I'm in chart design. I click select data, and this allows me to change it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course. And I could switch the row and column too. So this is telling a different story now, right? I'm switching between my rows and my columns. So now things are kind of switched up a little bit. I could change the chart as well. So keeping all of my formatting, but maybe I want to switch it to like a 3D chart or something. I can do something like that, right? So the whole thing got kept the same, but now it's 3D. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff. Uh, as you play around with it, there's new things that you discover. Like for instance, I didn't know immediately, and I'm like, okay, well, should be a way of doing it. So if I go in the layout tab, select data, all right, so I could change it up a bit. So it's great to know that, you can always kind of pivot a little bit if you need midway. Okay. So, okay, we went over that. And we could also change the style too, right? There's different default styles over here. So like if I want to make it like have a black background or something, There's a whole bunch of different things that I can do here. You can be like really creative with it. You don't have to use a theme like this, right? These are just sample themes, but they're handy to have, right? You want to make something have a little bit of pizzazz really nice and quickly, you can do that. Or you can just manually change things yourself. Maybe you want to have a specific theme or something. Maybe I want to make it nice and summer themed, right? Could do all different things. Okay, let me go on to, okay, spark lines. So this is going to be our last topic for today. So all of the things that we've covered before are these really big graphs that take up a really big chunk of data, right? I mean, okay, this is great if I want to have like a really big chart going on here, right? Maybe I want this to be like a, really pivotal moment in a business presentation, right? We like to see numbers, we like to see data, we like to see things in a positive aspect, right? Because again, this is showing my data in a visual fashion. This tells a bigger story than my original data, right? All these guys do. But sometimes these things are big, and all I want is just a little trend line or a little bar graph. Like, even if it was only just a cell big, just showing a very, 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 very simple version of it, right? I don't need the title, this and that. I just need a trend line to show that it's going up. Maybe I have data here and I don't need to devote an entire chart to it, right? Because space can sometimes be of the essence. That's where we're going to get into spark lines. And as you can see, these are like little mini trend lines and little mini column graphs, right? It tells the story, but in a much smaller fashion. Because you know what? I see what's going on here. I got test scores, right? Let's say these are student test scores going from a 90 to an 80 to a 95, right? All I need here is just a trend line that shows that, okay, students started as a 90. Oh, they didn't do as good on the second exam, but then they really did well on the third exam, right? This trend line does exactly that without having to devote an entire graph to this one student, right? Because imagine I'd have to make a whole chart for every single student. I just want something quick, simple. That's why it's Spark. Think of like what a spark is. It's like a little bolt of electricity. It tells a tiny little story here. I can do this with trend lines. I could do this with columns. This is pretty cool too. A win and a loss spark line. What this does is it shows my baseline, right? Let's say my baseline is 0, right? If it's positive, it'll be blue and it'll be above that baseline. If it's negative, it'll be red and it'll be below that baseline. So again, every type of data has a different story to tell, and there's a specific graph that might work with it. All of these guys are nicely defaulted right next to our charts. So you could think of this as your big charts and this as your mini charts. So if I created a spark line, just like with our charts, I could specify the data range, right? If I want to highlight it, and then I specify where I want the spark line to be placed. So unlike with my big charts, I'm going to actually literally devote a whole little cell for this guy, right? I'm not really going to be moving this guy around. I'm going to be literally leaving him in a little cell like this. Now I could format it and do all kinds of things to it, but it will not be one of those big charts that we're familiar with. Okay. So yeah, I can format it. There's different cell styles and stuff. I could change the color, the marker color, all that kind of stuff, right? So let's say I wanted to format this over here, right? I'm just going to have, let's say, a spark line for 1, 2, 3, 4, and for this guy down here too. So let's just make one for this top one, and I'm going to copy and paste the formula for the bottom one using our fill that we've covered before. So insert my charts here. I'm going to go to spark lines, and let's see, maybe I'll just do a line for this one. Okay, so I selected the range, right? This just what I selected. Then I want to select where I want to place it. I'm going to just click on the box, right? There's no need for me to type it in manually if I could just click it. Notice what's very important here is this is an absolute reference, right? So if I end up moving this guy around, right? It is hard-coded in this position, right? The data that I'm using is not hard-coded, but this guy is hard-coded. Okay, and just like that, I have my little spark line here. So I can kind of see it's just my straight line. I mean, it's kind of simple data. I'm just going 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Let's say I drag and drop this dude. Now I see a slightly different story. I changed this second one to be 25,000 just for a previous example. And this also shows a nice little spark line going up, 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 up for 25,000, and then going back down, 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 down for 3,000. So this tells a nice little story. And I don't have to just have it like that. I can do the same exact thing for like a bar graph or something. So let's do the same exact thing, right? But this time, let's see what the bar graph would look like for this. Column graph. I don't know why I keep saying bar graph. So this time, same data, just going to put it in this box over here. We have columns now. So it's just showing we're growing, we're growing, we're growing. Looks like little steps in a way, right? This time we can clearly kind of see this 25,000 really dominates here. Now, this column graph is not really the best showing of this data here, right? It's very hard to see, especially here, how these guys compare. They all look like tiny little nothings compared to this 25,000. So that is the problem with spark lines. You can't really change it as much, right? You don't have as much freedom as with, let's say, a larger graph. And it all depends on the data that's given, right? If I have data here, right, this is telling a story that I have this really big outlier and the rest is like really tiny. The trend line, on the other hand, is really showing that trend over time. That, yeah, the big outlier is right over here, and all of this is much smaller. So you want to just kind of play it by ear, see what works best for your data. And every story is going to be a little bit different with your data. But it's handy, especially when you're seeing trend lines of like student grades, right? If I'm taking a look at how a student is progressing, okay, I see numbers, but I want something really quick. If I see that a student, oh, look at this, they're going up, 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 or maybe they go up, down, up, down, up, down, or maybe they're going in a downward trend, I can immediately assess that and I can try to adjust my lessons. Maybe I changed something in my lesson plans and I wanted to see how it affected student performance, right? This is a great way to instantly see that across so many different students. Because I can essentially just drag and drop this formula on as many students as I want. It's not like with a chart where I have to actually insert this chart, insert that chart, insert a chart for each student. So for something like this, spark lines, nice and quick. Okay. Yeah, and we can change the styles and everything too as well, but that is pretty much the end for that. So if you need to change anything here, right, we can go into our settings for this, right? If I'm highlighting over a spark line over here, just like how with the chart, I get a chart design format, here I get a spark line format, right? And I could change all of the different colors. There's different cell styles. I could change the sparkline color, the marker color, the axis, all kinds of stuff here. I could even change it from a line to a column to a win-o-loss, anything that I need. If I need to edit my data, I could change the location where I group it in. I can change if I have any hidden cells, if I don't want to have anything, right? Last time we had gone over that if I'm using a function and I don't want something included, right? I could use, let's say I'm finding the average. I could use average or I could use average A. Average only takes in cells that have data. Average A takes in everything, right? Here, I could show empty cells as gaps, show empty cells as zeros, or just leave it alone. Let's say I delete the data that's here. Okay, it cut off my data on the trend line, but here it left a little gap. So maybe I need to change that. What I can do is instead of showing it as a gap, maybe I show it as a zero instead. Now it shows it going down before it goes up. So being able to handle these kinds of things can make your data much more receptive to different changes. All right, so that's pretty much it. I'm going to open up the last question of the day. I don't know why I'm getting 100 emails here. Okay, we're going to open up the last question of the day, answer that, and then there's just a little check-in at the end. And if you have any questions, let me know. But once you're done, feel free to head out.
Hey, Professor, I had a quick question.
Sure.
For the midterm, is it going to be a multiple choice format or is it going to be like an Excel sheet where we have to do tasks just like the Pearson maybe?
So that's a great question. It's going to be mostly more multiple choice based. If you want to kind of see the types of questions, those extra credit quizzes are going to be very similar to the types of questions that we'll be asking on the midterm.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. And also if you do them, they'll count as like some extra points for your midterms as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Of course.
And is it on Monday, right?
You
Next
got
Monday?
it. Yep.
Got it. Thank
Yeah, I'll probably have a post on that tomorrow. Question? The what function? I don't think so, no. Yeah, you should be good. Yeah, for any of like the questions on the exam, by the way, it will only be based on what we've covered in like lecture and lab. So we're gonna like be hand curating all the questions and everything. So if it's something that like we have not gone over, it will not be on the exam. Right? We're not going to expect you to know something that doesn't exist or something that like has spent like hardly any time to kind of go over. I see a question in the chat, Abriana. Okay.
So
Oh,
regard
yes. Yeah, you can definitely speak to me after. No problem. Sorry. What was that? I heard another question.
Yeah, so regarding the projects, currently we have four projects, correct?
Yes.
Two of them, it's both of the level one, it's not graded.
Yeah, so
Mm.
none of the level ones will be graded. It will only be the level two ones. So it'll be the ones that are actually marked as homework.
Okay, and I see both of them is due on the 7th, correct?
Yeah, everything that's graded is going to be due on Sunday the 7th.
Okay.
Professor,
Yeah, what's up?
yesterday I was doing the project for chapter one, and once I submitted my file, Pearson gave me my report, and there was some things that I saw that were incorrect, but other things I don't know how they were incorrect, and I was wondering if we could go over them if possible. Um, it's not too many anyways, but something we could go over so you could show me what to do to fix it so I could get a better grade.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to do that after class or tomorrow in lab? What works for you?
I prefer after class, but after Brianna has her moments with you would be best. So I could just
Sure.
join the meeting like I guess like 10 minutes afterwards if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Totally
Oh,
fine.
great. Thanks, Professor.
Yeah, of course. Happy to help. All right, I'm gonna end the recording here.